really looking at three metrics and I'm saying this is how I'm judging success. What's that top line growth look like? What's our new customer acquisition rate from our loyalty customers? Are we maintaining their rate of kind of coming back to the store?
Welcome to the Dispensary Marketing Podcast, where we interview the top dispensary owners and experts in this space so that you can stay up to date with the latest trends and strategies that you'd otherwise miss out on. I hope you enjoy this episode. Julio, thanks for hopping on the Dispensary Marketing Podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
No worries. So for the audience, can you please tell them who you are, the name of your store, and where you're located?
Yeah, my name is Julio Casado. I'm the CEO of Anja, and we're a dispensary located in Highland Park, New Jersey.
Awesome. So what are your keys to running a successful dispensary?
Keys to running a successful dispensary, I think definitely has to do with organizational management. I think it starts and ends in a lot of ways with your team. Your from the executives running more of or overseeing more of like your corporate processes and overarching strategy and tactics. But definitely your store team, right? Your retail leadership team. That's the general manager, inventory manager, purchasing manager, and your bud tenders. That's really the lifeline, in my opinion, of a successful dispensary. And in this very competitive market, how your bud tenders in a lot of ways receive customers, interact with customers, and help customers through their journey is one of the few places where we can have a where we can differentiate ourselves from our competitors.
Right. So how did you guys get started?
It's started years back, even before Anja. I wanted to make a play in cannabis, used and been around cannabis for a very long time. Picked up actually using cannabis as a lot more of my day-to-day, week-to-week life. I actually stopped drinking. And cannabis was a big part of that transition for me. And that happened maybe 7 years ago now, 6 years ago. And really, I kind of just fell in love with the plant in a different way. Before it was more of a recreational use, cultural, music, friends. But I fell in love with the plant from a kind of wellness angle, really focusing in on effects and really just kind of seeing where the legal market was taking cannabis. In the I'll call it the illicit market or the underground market, very much was always flower based. Dabbled a little bit in edibles, but wasn't necessarily too much into edibles and things like that. And then I think the innovation, the product innovation in the legal market was very interesting. Not to mention that brands were really becoming a thing. They probably were already a thing when I took note, but just started seeing the importance of brands. In the kind of illicit underground market, it was a lot around strains and your dealer, right? That was your connection to the marketplace in a sense. So with the legal market, it was more, or it started to become brands and products. With strains always, being important, but definitely kind of brands and products. So I really just started thinking to myself, well, what would me making a play into cannabis look like? I started first dabbling in the kind of hemp market, focusing in on CBD, and thinking through really CBD or hemp flower in different products. And eventually I started focusing in on New Jersey because I felt like there was a great opportunity in Jersey on the legal regulated cannabis side. And they're both regulated, but not farm bill side, right? But the state market side, state regulation side. And that's when I really started diving deep into what would it look like to bring a dispensary to life. Started with conversations with my one of my partners in my digital marketing agency. So my background is in digital marketing. I have an agency that's still still up, still running. We're industry agnostic, but my partner, who is very much a lover of cannabis, I would say more so than even I am. At least he's always on the cutting edge of knowing new products, new strains, and things of that nature. We started kind of brand exploring. That eventually led me to meeting one of my other partners who came up with the name itself, Anja. We sat down for a lunch just through an introduction. And I was telling her, hey, I'm thinking about opening up a cannabis dispensary. After maybe 30, 45 minutes of conversation, she said, I think I have the name for it. And I said, okay, let me hear it. What's the name? And she said, Anja. And I was like, done.
Boom.
That's the name. I love it. Yeah. So everything kind of not fell into place because nothing falls into place in this industry, but everything started building on itself from there.
Right. So you mentioned you had a digital marketing agency, and you still do. Were you always like entrepreneurship based? Did you have any previous businesses before that, before the digital marketing?
No, so I mean, I started actually my career in human resources, either internally or doing human capital consulting for large organization. At some point, I actually decided to kind of branch out on my own
Mhm.
to do consulting, business development consulting. Starting off in the nonprofit space, I had a really great mentor. His name is Dwayne Ashley, and he kind of brought me in and helped me understand entrepreneurship, helped me understand pitching, looking for clients, and things of that nature. But I didn't really have any kind of hard skills in a sense. In my opinion, I didn't feel like I had like really hard skills to be able to not just like understand strategy. And I was really early on in understanding strategy at all from a business growth perspective, but being able to then execute. So through a lot of different kind of connections and conversations, I found myself gravitating into the growth marketing space. I met who is now another one of the partners. His name is Matt in the agency, which is called Full Funnel Growth. And he's a genius marketer, e-com, D2C. Really started learning from him and then started learning on my own. Eventually, we actually formed or founded Full Funnel Growth, the agency, and again, it's grown from there. So I took a detour into entrepreneurship. I would say probably halfway or just about entering the halfway point of my career, and somehow it's led me to opening up a cannabis dispensary. So that's the interesting thing about entrepreneurship. You kind of have to follow the journey, let the journey lead you sometimes, right? Rather than like trying to dictate, this is where I want to take it.
Right, right. So you said something interesting before, as well about transitioning your perspective on getting customers based on brand, right? Because brand is a thing that people associate other things with, essentially. What, in the digital marketing space, it's very much how do I get a client? How do I network with these people? How do I get, B2B, essentially, right? What was that, I guess, marketing transition from your perspective to market a digital marketing agency to now marketing a dispensary? Because you did mention like some of the hard skills, like effectively those skills are slightly different, going from more so B2B now to B2C.
I think I was fortunate that even though growing my agency is a B2B demand gen, lead gen play, our clients were almost primarily D2C e-com
Mm.
at that time. So I've always been able to wear both hats, which I think is what the advantage and what even gave me the idea that, hey, we can do this. Now, mind you, I won't say I underestimated, but retail, brick and mortar is definitely its own thing.
It's a
Um,
beast.
yeah, 100%. And, I am grateful to bring in the ecom D2C knowledge because a lot of how we built our customer acquisition model is based around that. Digital touch points, bringing people in, how does the website convert them? We focus a lot on online pre-orders. And again, just thinking about customer acquisition in more the digital way. But retail, right, it's its own thing. And I would say right now it's 50-50 where we still do a lot of new customer acquisition and just general retention only on the retail end. There's not a lot of digital touch points. But I would say that probably our most loyal customers, our customers that come back most often, are definitely through the digital acquisition funnel. But again, to your original question, it didn't require that much of a shift because I've been able to play in both for such a long time. But definitely, the B2B sales process is completely different than D2C ecom retail. So oftentimes I find myself having a harder time switching my brain back to the B2B side to make sure,
Mhm.
you know, the agency continues to grow versus the D2C side, which, you know, feels a little bit um, more like a machine in a lot of ways, right? Like, you know, the inputs, you have your expected outputs, you have your levers that you pull. And it's like how to consistently make sure that that right machine is being well fed.
You're speaking my language. Inputs, outputs, leverage, all that fun stuff. Which one do you like? Which one do you prefer?
I think I probably like B2B, but prefer D2C, if
Ah,
that makes any sense. I like B2B because, you know, I think it's a lot like building relationships.
mhm.
Um, you know, it takes a little bit more time to get to know the people you're talking to, get to know the clients, and it feels a little bit more like you're embarking on like a long-term relationship, a long-term journey, a long-term partnership. I prefer D2C because it's a little bit more immediate when it comes to measuring success
The
and
feedback
knowing
loops are quicker.
the feedback loops are so much quicker. Yeah. So it's kind of like, ah, this is great. I know this is working. I know this is not working. You can pivot a lot faster.
Yeah.
So probably my I don't know how to describe it, but the side of me that likes a little bit of instant gratification prefers the D2C. I just see also like, I mean, scaling a B2B business is hard, right? Like it's very, especially on services. I mean, for me, as soon as we started growing the agency, I've just felt like we have to have our own brand. We have to have our own D2C because, right, like to hit 10, 25, $50 million services company, like just thinking about that is very daunting, right? While hitting a 10, 25, 50 million D2C company, yes, that's 100% daunting. Don't get me wrong. But you know, it just feels like, oh, like you know, this is doable. I know, you know, you can do it. So that's kind of how I balance the two, the two sides.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like you said, B2C is like or B2B is very much relationships, network building. You're scaling with people, right? And ultimately, scaling with people is a lot more difficult than scaling with product, right? Like product, don't get me wrong, it's difficult. Supply chain issues, bad product, good product, quality control, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, like you have a plan and then you ship it, right? Or whatever products and then you ship it. You want to scale up, you just ship more of it, right? If you want, if you want to scale up agency, you can't like clone people, right? You have to find good talent, retain good talent, like making sure that that talent's doing a good job, making sure that, as you're scaling up, the cracks that are coming, on the other side of the equation aren't going to drown the entire boat. Right. Because that also happens, right? The more people you add, the more complexity you add to a system, the more difficult it is for you to continue ensuring that whatever foundation and base that you built out originally, continues going, right? If you're a small founder company with, 1 to 10 people, you're talking to the same people every single day. You're making sure everyone's on the same page. You want to scale up to 50 million, you have your 500 employees, right? Then it's like, no, the person at the top is so far away from the person at the bottom. But that's the only way you can make that work, right? So completely get that. So,
Yeah.
what's your day-to-day looking like these days?
My day to day these days really are just focusing on growth.
Okay.
And what are the kind of organic channels? What are all of the things that we can do that honestly don't fall into the expertise that I brought in, right? So D2C, e-com, digital marketing, because so much of growth of a store has to do with community building, has to do with events, has to do with relationships with your customers over a longer period of time because you want them to keep coming back and feeling like this is their home. You know, new customer acquisition is very expensive in cannabis, extremely expensive, especially when you've had players around me who've been, you know, who've had years of a head start, right? Convincing someone to leave their dispensary to come to ours when there's a, you know, still a lack of menu differentiation, and you're really only competing on price in a lot of ways, is very, very, very difficult. And you can only do that by offering, right, creating incentives and opportunities for people to come and engage with your brand, which right now my brand is the store, right? Like it's how do people feel walking in? How do people feel walking out? How do people feel taken care of? And are they getting the best product assortment that we can provide at the most competitive price? So that's really what I'm always thinking about. Always kind of evaluating prior week against this week. What's the new customer acquisition rate that we're seeing? Because that, if that starts tapering off, you may not feel it immediately, but you're not going to see growth down the line. And then thinking about what's the future for us, right? Like, we're a single independent owned store. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can go, each with its varying degree of fundraising requirements, funding, complexity, and building out more competencies and teams. And it's like, we only opened up in January, so you never want to be too early and premature on kind of what's next. But it's always like on the back of our mind, what's next? How do I continue to grow this company? And then also, right, provide value to everyone that took a risk on me, on us, and invested with us, right? At the end of the day, we only raise money from friends and family, right? We don't have any institutional investors. We don't have any institutional debt. And like, I want to make sure that all of them make something, right, off of this. Money is scarce, and it's something that people kind of use as a signal. Like, I believe that you can accomplish and achieve. And for me, it's a debt that I definitely want to repay to every one of them. So it's trying to figure out what does growth look like 18 months from now, and then dealing with the ever constant changing world of cannabis, regulatory, new dispensaries opening up every single day. New Jersey is hyper competitive. So that's really kind of what keeps me busy.
Right. So, you mentioned that you guys opened up recently, like in January, so this year, so not even a year old, right?
Yeah.
But you're also taking a look at your data points, customer acquisition, new customer, ad spend, ROAS, so on and so forth, right? How do you, if you're looking at your data, right, how do you filter out the noise? And what I mean by that is, like, you could be doing the exact same processes, but how do you take into consideration seasonality, right? Because you don't have the 36-month data point previously, right? How are you taking into consideration, competition, where your inputs, because like here's the possible issue, right? You have a set of 10 inputs, right, that you think are going to take your company from A to B, right? You can continue those same inputs, but 3 other dispensaries might be opening up down the street, right? But those 10 inputs are the actual inputs to get you from point A to point B fastest. But along that journey, if those 3 dispensaries open up, they're taking market share, and then you might actually see a decrease in new customer acquisition, right? How do you know to filter out whether you're going to continue on track with your existing inputs or pivot your inputs based on, let's say, lower traffic or whatever it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's very, very difficult. I don't think, even for me personally, that I am doing the best job at filtering out the noise.
Mm.
Right now, I'm kind of ignoring the noise in a little bit, where I'm really looking at 3 metrics and I'm saying, this is how I'm judging success, right? So it's what's that top line growth look like? What's our new customer acquisition rate? And then, how are we, from our loyalty customers, are we maintaining their rate of kind of coming back to the store? So not just the retention, right? But like for our our weekly shoppers, like, is that growing? Right. And really the weekly shoppers is the ones that come back to us every week. If we start seeing them move away, then it's like a red flag. Everything is impacted by everything in a lot of ways, right? Like, even traffic. Yes, I go on a GA4, I'm looking at traffic on the website, but I'm trying not to let that move me too much. Because traffic is dipping up and down, and sometimes that's directly correlating to how much money we're spending on Meta. Local rankings, of course, that's a long-term play. But if people kind of jump up ahead of us in local rankings, I'm trying not to let that, right, be like, oh, what's going on? And then with every new dispensary opening, right, there's always going to be at least some natural inclination, especially for, I think, the people who are deepest in cannabis consumption, to at least go check it out, right, and try it. So that's really what it is. It's trying to really focus on those 3 metrics, which are the ones that, to me, I feel like are the most important. They may not be, I'll be proven right or wrong over time. And again, trying to just ignore, not even filtering it out, but literally ignore it. It's like traffic went down. Okay, it's fine. What are these other metrics telling me? I'm just gonna focus on that.
Right.
Because yeah, it's too early. Like seasonality. I mean, I had no idea what to expect for 420. I just
Yeah.
knew it was gonna be big, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of planned on that, but I didn't know how big. I had no idea. Like summer, everyone told me summer was gonna slow down pretty significantly in my area. So far it's been not that, right? But what's what's the rest of Q3 gonna look like? What's Q4 gonna look like? I mean, I know what Q4 looks like on D2C ecom, BFCM, holiday sales, but how does that translate to cannabis and retail? I don't know, right? So all I can do is kind of best prepare based on what I expect to happen. And then pivot immediately as it doesn't work, because that's kind of the name of the game in cannabis. Things sometimes just don't work, and you
Yep.
better move away from it as fast as you can.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I can provide my 2 cents, I think some secondary metrics which might be just of interest is so how you have like somebody can't come in and just buy a metric ton of flour, right? There's a certain weight limit that you can have based on each category that you have. So again, secondary metric not as important, but something to keep an eye on is percentage of people buying to total like maximum basket size. So, you can have your flower product and, I don't know how much it is in your state, right? But like if people are, what is the hypothetical maximum that people can put in their cart, right? Like what's the maximum that people can actually spend and what is the percentage that you are hitting there? So, if you're buying concentrates and you're selling the cream of the crop stuff, maybe your highest basket size in one checkout can be, I don't know, $500 or whatever it is, right? But you have that expected metric for each of the different categories that you have. And then that is also, because LTV for customers is frequency and cart size, right? So if you can increase cart size by training your bud tenders, and then that this metric, and that metric doesn't matter how much traffic it is, it's just on a per customer basis. So if you know that on average, the percentage maximum basket size is only 20%, then maybe you can train your bud tenders to work on a little bit more upselling, because maybe that metric should be closer to 40%, right? And so that might be an interesting metric for you to track over time. And that will ebb and flow as well, right? With price compression, less with competition, because competition is just about people not coming to your store in the first place, right? People aren't going to your store and then going to a second store to re-up on another product, right? That metric might more have to do with like what the economy is looking like, right? Obviously, you'll have less people, but if your same customers are purchasing less, then that is also an indication of what's going on. But a secondary metric for you to take into consideration that doesn't necessarily have to do with traffic, but can affect your top line. So that's one of them.
No, and that's great. And I will add to that point that while those are the metrics I'm looking at, I think different people in the organization are also looking at other metrics, which I think is a good thing, right? Because it allows us all to kind of have our own North Star in the way.
Yeah.
While I'm trying to keep the more broader North Star. But to that point, right, my general manager, who's phenomenal, her name is Antonella, she's looking at AOV, UPT, right, units per transaction, and then sales per hour.
Yeah.
And she actually brought an interesting sales per hour metric, because I've been down on Sunday, for example. We're open the least amount of time on Sunday. But if you look at our sales per hour, Sunday is actually a pretty relatively good day. And now it's like, well, did we increase hours on Sunday, right? Like, is it that everyone's compressing their sales, which I never think is the answer, but it's something that always needs to be considered. Or can we add on more by increasing the hours? So completely agree. Looking at AOV as a percentage of maximum allowed purchase is really interesting. I haven't thought
Yeah.
about that. So thank you. I'll definitely look into that.
Yeah, I can't take credit. I've done a lot of these podcasts, and that was just kind of one of the things that I was like, oh, that's really, really interesting, right? Because you have a maximum hypothetical size of your basket, right? So,
Yeah.
see the percentage of that kind of again it's a metric that helps you filter out the noise of traffic, but helps you see how like each actual customer is enjoying or not enjoying your products, right? So that's, and then as for traffic, on our side, what we've seen is like it really depends. So, we have a client like in South Portland, Maine, heavy tourist area, population's like 30,000 or something like that, right? So it's inverse, right? Summers, they're essentially like where they make all their money, right? It's not a seasonal business per se, but all of the tourists kind of come in and it's like, okay, we go to Google, we find the nearest one, and then, boom, we're good to go, right? So the loyalty play and retention play actually matters slightly less. Because if you're getting tourists coming in, right, like, for them to come back year after year after year, it's a tougher play, right? Whereas if you're in the neighborhood, it might be a little bit easier, right? But in general, what we've seen in non-touristy areas, right, summer's actually a slight uptick, right? It starts to go back down, maybe fallish time, and then it kind of peaks back up. And again, this is on our side. I don't know what your actual metrics are going to look like. Maybe we can revisit this in a year to see, if this is true. But closer to the October, November is where it kind of dips. December, January is when it increases. People are off, people are in the spending thing already. Also, side note, I would recommend kind of doing, and you would probably know this in the D2C space, is like just do the deals when people are in the buying mode anyways, right? So you might be like, oh well, it's Black Friday, everyone's doing sales and deals, but everyone has their eyes open on deals anyways, right? So it's like you want to try and target people who have the predisposition to spending money, whereas post New Year's, it's like, oh crap, I spent all this money already, my wallet's closed, right? So instead of doing a deal then, it would probably make sense to do a deal, around when everyone else is doing a deal because people are shopping around for deals. So then come January, February, March, again, just a dip from the December high and then kind of peaks back up for April 420 and then, does a little bit this and then summer comes and then you repeat the cycle. So in general, that's what we've been seeing. So if that helps at all, then yeah.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps. And for me, I constantly that's one of my main drivers is, hey, we have to fit into our customers' life, not try to make them fit into ours, right? And what we want to do. So, what are the big days where they're already going out and looking for cannabis specifically, or just looking for deals or looking for this and that, right? Like we have to kind of create an incentive for them to, while they're looking, come to us rather than saying, well, this is what would be best for us as a business in terms of a deal, a discount, timing. Let's just do it then because it's best for us. But it's like, if that doesn't match the customers or existing behavior, the consumer behavior, right, it's going to fall flat.
Exactly. So, aside from all the many things that we spoke about, what would you say your current biggest challenges and struggles? What are you struggling with right now?
I mean, really, it's just, managing a young and growing business, right? It's I think the difficult thing about cannabis is that it takes you so long to open your doors that you feel like you're 2.5, 3 years in to this business, but then you open your doors and you're not actually 2.5, 3 years in. You just started, and managing those expectations, transitioning yourself away from, hey, I built this financial model, this is what I expected to do, constantly pitching that, and then opening up the doors, and it's like, who cares about that model? That means nothing now, right? It's like we have actual customers and data. This is the only thing that we need to deal with. I'm still struggling with that 7 months in, right? Where it's like, like dealing with that exhaustion. Like I've been working at this and working very hard at this for a long time, but it's a brand new business. So that helps with expectations. Menu differentiation, trying to always provide a great customer experience, of course, is a challenge. It's a great challenge, but it's a challenge nonetheless, and that's something we always have to keep up on. And then managing the unknown, like truly, it's an unknown. I have no idea what the rest of the year is going to look like, and as much as I try to talk to people and predict, again, what I've learned in this industry is that you really can't predict anything. Things can change so quickly. You just have to always be prepared to shift, to pivot, and to meet customers where they're at. So those will always be the kind of challenges for me. Again, I have a great team, so it's retail, right? There's staff challenges, and luckily I don't have to dive deep into that because I have a strong retail leadership team. There's financial things to always think about. Have a strong CFO, marketing. Even coming from a marketing background, like I have a CMO, right? And it's like he's a partner in the agency as well, but he leads up all the marketing from an ops perspective, right? I have an excellent COO. He leads up all the ops. So it's like letting people do what they know how to do, letting people operate at a high level in their space, and trying to focus kind of keep my focus on the things that I feel are the most important, as well as, again, growing the company, right? Like, how do I continue the company on a growth trajectory, not just within the four walls, but what comes after this? And that's something that's probably been the most difficult thing to answer is what comes next.
Right, right. But before we get into that, I've realized that after all of these interviews, dispensary owners need a safe space where they can ask the questions that Google doesn't have the answers for. So what I've done is I've created the world's first dispensary owners mastermind group, where it's an environment of like-minded individuals who can help make each other's lives easier and also make more money in the process. So if that's something that you're interested in, please check out the links in the description below. Now on to the rest of the show. So you've mentioned a few times, like, how good your team is, how good your staff is. How did you go about building, the Avengers?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it kind of just relied on the initial, I think, leadership team of the company relied on my network, right?
Okay.
It's like the people that I knew, the people who I know do good work. And then from there, some of it, especially on the retail side, I think some of it was luck, to be honest. It was, traditional job posting, interviews, but really trying to hire people based on our core values, right?
Right.
So number one, keep it local. It's like hiring people from the area, who know the culture of the area. It has been very important. And I think that that's been a big differentiator. Number two is keep it to cannabis. So not everyone came from the cannabis industry at all. But it had to be people who like love cannabis in a lot of ways. And that's been great for us as a company, because that love for the plant really comes out in customer interactions. And then like the last one is just really focus on people who are, about a team environment. So success and failure is not individualized. It's how are we collectively succeeding? How are we collectively failing? And that to me has made a huge difference. A lot of us are, I think there's a lot of talented people in the world. I think a lot of these skills are transferable. And there are a million people who can market a brand. There are a million people who can be a bartender, but trying to do hiring and keep the staff around these core values, I think is really what makes a difference.
Right. So, you essentially try and filter not the noise this time, but you try and filter to make sure that the people who you're bringing into the team are really capable for the vision that you also have for the rest of the company, right? It's not just hiring people just to fill a slot, but it's hiring people to have an actual purpose within the company to be able to, hopefully take this to however many stores you want to build out in the future and however many years you want to continue building, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think again, that's where things become interesting, right? What scale and growth? How does growing change a company? But for right now, I have the luxury of just focusing on this one store, and more than anything else, like I want this to be your local store, in a
Yes.
sense, right? Like it's for this community. And that means the way it looks and functions and operates and offers is meant for the people who live around us and with us. So that's been probably the main focus of where I'm trying to keep it. And then again, what growth looks like and how it changes it,
Right.
that comes later.
Right. No, that's super smart. I mean, I tell my clients all the time, you're not looking to be national famous. You're looking to be local famous, right? You don't need to have the equivalent of the Super Bowl campaign. That's, like if you can get one for free, great. But, for you to spend X millions of dollars on a Super Bowl campaign, it doesn't make any sense, right? Like, go local, because local, while there is more competition, it is less competition than trying to do this crazy national wide campaign, unless you got the deep pockets of the MSOs and stuff like that.
Right. And ultimately, right, like any of those things has to tie down to results. How
Yeah.
much revenue we're generating, how much of that is going to the bottom line. So, I mean, this is something that we constantly, there are a bunch of things I would love to do with just like, let's say, a pure brand play, be
Yes.
associated with different organizations, different campaigns that for sure take us outside of our region. But you have to be disciplined, right? Like if, for example, I've had publications, hey, do you want to publicize Anja in our publication? And one of my immediate questions is, what's the size of the New Jersey audience? How much traffic do you get from New Jersey? Can you narrow it down to our area? If they can't even answer those questions, it's a straight up no, right?
Yeah.
And it's not because they're not a valuable publication, let's say in the cannabis space. Yeah, they might get a lot of traffic and on the industry, right? We might know it, but hey, I'm sorry, if you can't get me eyeballs in New Jersey, it's gonna be a no.
100%. 100%. So what's your overall marketing mix to bring in customers? I mean, you alluded to it earlier with like local SEO. You said a little bit about Meta, but overall, what's like the general gist of what you got going on?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's a lot of Meta, Google Ads, your kind of table stakes when it comes to D2C, e-com approach, your performance marketing, of course, SEO, content in a lot of ways, and then email. I mean, email and SMS is just kind of bread and butter in
Yeah.
cannabis because it lets you get around a lot of the restrictions that you have, right? Advertising elsewhere. We've been doing a lot of events, and our COO, Kiro, is
Nice.
fantastic at events. So events has been going well. But even events, right, needs tweaking. Some events have been phenomenal. Other events have been lackluster. But events is very local. So we're still trying to understand the cadence of events that's appropriate for our community and what is it about our events that does drive them out and create engagement. I would say that those are probably our primary channels where we have most of our customer acquisition. And we're going to be trying different things, right? Like we're going to try direct mail and flyering. We're going to try like sponsoring community events.
Mhm.
Some of those things that are a little bit less measurable. I mean, you can do things in direct mail, for example, to make it measurable. Maybe put a QR code on your postcard, incentivize people with a specific offer to kind of track right how people came in. But that's still things that we're thinking about trying. And I definitely welcome any ideas if you have it on that end as well, because it has to be a mix of online and offline in order to be a successful store.
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you go too hard on either or the other one, you're not diversified in terms of the marketing channels themselves, right? On the offline side, I mean, the people that I've spoken to in general, I've asked them the same question, right? Like the problem is with like these now branding events, these offline events is the attribution, right? It's like, how do you know that this event led to this, right? And yes, you can have a QR code. You can say, hey, come to the store and say and shout or something like that, right? And have somebody at the cashier just marking down how many people shouted, when they came in, and then you can have some sort of metric to see how that works. But in most, if not all of the cases, because I do personally ask that question myself, because coming from, again, the marketing agency background, the data analytics and stuff like that, it's all about attribution. How do you track what you've done so that you can provide measurable results to the input that you have so you have a desired output, right? And most of the time they tell me like, look, like at the end of the day, it is very much just like a branding play. Attribution is very hard, but they find like just the consistency of them doing it, they think it helps, right? Nobody has come to me saying like, yes, I sponsored this event and it definitively did this, right? But most of the times I see them pairing it with something for the community anyways. So, if it's a charity sponsorship event, right, it's just for the good of the business and the community either way, like regardless if there's an ROI in it at the end of the day. So like they do stuff like that, sponsoring music events and doing these sorts of things, and more so contributing to the because there's still this stigma around cannabis itself, right? So
Of
just
course.
saying that, like, hey, we're in this community, right? And for the people who are still weary about this drug or whatever um, it is still something that is benefiting the community locally, right? So if you are sponsoring local events and doing all these things, like it ends up being a good thing. Now, I think if you want more direct attribution, business partnerships, and this is where you can put your B2B hat back on, is probably a little bit easier in terms of attribution. So finding the number one hairdresser, in the neighborhood locally, right? Finding the number one florist, right? Finding like whatever those businesses are. And then you can say, hey, we're such a local community. We now have partnerships with, value stacking, right? So, hey, you work with our agency and you get 15% discount off of 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 different companies, right? So you can essentially do the same thing as like, hey, if you come across, Sarah's florist company, right? Get a 15% off anything that you buy for Valentine's Day. So now you have direct attributable things that you can track on both sides of the equation, right? So then on the flip side on 420, then they can do a 420 deal on their side and then, kind of, help you out with that, right? So different things like that make it a little bit more attributable. But when we're talking about events and communities and like larger scale things where you're just sponsoring stuff, it's a little bit trickier. Maybe on a day-to-day basis, like, hey, I sponsored this event, so we're seeing more traffic over these next 3 days and have like the whole 7-day, 3-day window type thing. But overall, it is very much a brand play. But what I would say is like consistency reigns over everything. It's like you know, when you look at those commercials with a car, right? I don't know, the Kia driving underneath the bridge going really fast, and the family and the SUV and the Ford, you know, driving off-road and all that stuff. Nobody looks at those ads and says, yes, I'm going to buy a Ford F-150 right now. They're like, you know, I'm looking to buy a truck. Okay, you know, I'm going to check these guys out and see what they're all about, right? But you don't really get that unless you have the consistency within the community. So in most cases, it's not necessarily a home run. It's just like, is this something I can add to the budget that I can consistently do over the next year or so and not really worry about any return until I am worrying about a return kind of thing. And that would be the general thought process about that, those sorts of things.
Yeah. No, I think that those are great points. I mean, attribution could be, as marketers, I'm doing my best right now to not let attribution be kind of like a cage in a way for my thinking.
Yes. Yes.
Because that's been like all I'm about for a long time, right? If it's not attributable, I'm not doing it. If I can't drive attribution, but
direct response.
right,
No.
exactly. But honestly, what Anja has taught me is, in a lot of ways, how important brand is.
Yes.
And how growing a brand isn't necessarily always measurable from the way that we think about attribution, especially being able to attribute revenue and ROAS, right? It's like you can't only be driven by those things, especially when you start looking. Now, look, if you got hired to be a growth marketer, be a performance marketer, then yes, of course. But when you're leading a larger brand, a larger organization, you have to think about more than just your direct attribution. And I would say that that's something that I've learned along the way. And I think myself and our CMO, because he's also a growth marketer, has learned along the way. And I can see it. And when he presents things and talks about things now, how much brand is starting to take shape and really dominate our conversations in a lot of ways. And it's a good thing. So yeah, we're thinking about a lot of those things. The local business partnership is a great suggestion. I wish there was a way to really definitively quantify, right, impact of brand of brand marketing in a lot of ways, but I think you see it in the reception, right? How people feel walking in again. And just like every time somebody walks into the store, it's like, hey, I brought my friend. That's brand to me, right? Yes. So that means a lot.
Yeah. You know, I mean, we're getting super tactical in this podcast. I don't know how many, how many people are actually going to look into it, but I think this is super interesting because it's right up my alley. One thing that I would say is you have enough data points in now 7 months in where you should have a demographic of your highest paying customers, your customers that are most frequent coming in, that sort of stuff, right? It could be male between the ages of 18 to 24. It could be female from the ages of 30 to 30, like whatever it is, right? So you will have some sort of metric on who the top ideal customers are for your business, right? The problem now with event things is like, okay, I want to sponsor an event or I want to run an event. What do I do? Like, what is the thing that I sponsor, right? And the easiest way is to do things that associate with cannabis itself, concerts, music events, that sort of thing, right? But if you want to get more granular, it's just like look at your core demographic, look at, what people are purchasing and what age, right? And if you can replicate your top 20% customer base, the whole 80-20 stuff, right? Like, how would you go about doing it, right? So then you kind of you look at your data, see how much they purchase, and then essentially that's where your community money should be spent. And then you need to figure out what resonates with them. So it's not just, hey, how can I put Anja where they are? It's how can I associate Anja with the things that they like and also where they are? Because that's also another thing, right? It's like, just having a logo up on a little banner flyer doesn't do anything. But you need to now associate, I'm just, talking off the top of my head, but let's say, well, you can't even do it really to these Gen Z people, but let's just say Fortnite is the thing, right? It's just a really easy example. So you would go out and you would find some sort of event, but then associate Anja with Fortnite. And then now you become the cool thing within that core demographic of people, right? So finding those events that also align with what that demographic finds cool is equally as important as sponsoring the events themselves. Because if you now go sponsor events that are now, females from the ages of 60 to 70, it doesn't really matter because they're not going to purchase from you anyway. So you might as well be marketing to people out of state, right? So figuring out your core demographic, then almost surveying them And, I don't know if you can like kind of ask them questions, but I don't know if you're in the store personally, but you have people inside of the store that know people by name. Hey, Jack, thanks for coming into the store, right? Hey, Sarah, thanks for coming into the store. What can I do for you? And then you just generate general conversations like what movies are they watching, right? What pop culture references, what music are they listening to, right? And then you can get an idea of like, okay, I have X budget to spend. What events associate ourselves with our top 20% of purchasers in the specific area that we're looking for? And then that will give you the highest probability chance that that brand will be associated, or your brand will be associated with the things that they like. And then the things that they like will then make them want to purchase from you. So I hope that makes sense.
That does make sense, and that's actually something that I think we haven't done too much of formally, is talking
Mhm.
to our customers after the fact about things that's not related to kind of cannabis and buying cannabis. So that's really interesting to kind of think about of how do we get them to engage and just tell us things about themselves, just their life and where they live, where they exist, what do they do, that can help us benefit from creating a stronger kind of bond with them.
Yeah, because like that's exactly it, right? It's like, why do all these massive fashion brands just get celebrities to come in? They're not like, buy my jewelry, buy my jewelry, buy my jewelry. It's like, oh, holy crap, Zendaya is doing this jewelry thing, so I want to be like Zendaya. It's not, I want to wear diamond jewelry. It's, I want to be like her, right? So that's more so brand. It's an association with what people think are already cool. And you can do it the hard way and build your own brand yourself, right? But, Nike sponsors, is working with LeBron, and I buy my shoes because I want to be like LeBron, not because I want to wear basketball shoes. You know what I mean? So it's like when you're branding yourself as a dispensary, you're doing it because they want to associate themselves with cool thing A, not because they necessarily just want to smoke or consume, right? Because they can just go to any other store, right?
Right.
So, that would be just like an interesting kind of switch. And then if you really want to dive deep, this is not a scalable strategy at all. But if you really want to dive deep, look at your Google reviews and then associate the Google reviews with who've purchased. And then you can see how many people, like what like how much that person has spent. And then you have a name, you have a face, then you have a better idea of like who they are as a person. And then you can, you can stereotype, right? You can be like, okay, well, all of these dudes look young, they don't have beards, whatever it is, like our demographic is generally like this. Do some stalking and kind of figure out what that demographic looks like, right? Like at the end of the day, if you want to figure out what your demographic is, you're going to have to stereotype a bit, right? You're not going to have the 18-year-old that likes playing with Barbies, even though there are 18-year-olds that probably like playing with Barbies, but you get the point, right? So if you look at your Google reviews, it's interesting because people only write Google reviews when they're super polarized emotionally, right? Very positive or very negative, right? And you know this in the DTC space when people are like, this product sucks. I can't believe they even did this. Why is this even on the shelf? 1 star, right? This product is amazing. It changed my life. This is so great. 5 stars, right? So you can associate the fact that they spent a lot of money with your business, that they've also given you 5 star reviews, and now you can associate what your core demographic is of who you resonate best with, so on and so forth. So again, I'm, giving out all the secrets, but that's another, strategy. If you really
No,
want to dive deep into it, you can.
that's interesting. And I think the funny thing about Google reviews, just a comment anecdotally on that is, the high reviews, the 5 star reviews are about the store experience. The 1 star review, more often than not, is about a not being happy with the product. And I often, first of all, we overreact to every 1 star Google review
Always,
because
always.
it's just like, oh, like why? You don't want to see that kind of overall score ever go down. But like I always want to respond like, I don't make the products, I don't package it, right? But that's not right, right? Like for me, I'm still responsible for the quality of the product, even though I don't make it, I don't manufacture it, I don't package it and receive it packaged, because I'm selling it to you.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I always think about receiving those reviews, not as it's not my fault, why are you blaming me? But what are they trying to tell me about the products that they're looking for?
Mhm.
And how can I, or how can we as a team, think about the products that we're stocking based on that feedback? So that's kind of the interesting thing about Google reviews. Though again, it's like, yeah, you can hyperventilate. I mean, God forbid you ever get 2 1 stars in a row. That probably would be the worst day in your life.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, look, as consumers, we're like, yeah, 4.8, like that's fine, right? Like as owners, you're like, Oh, come on, like John, I can't believe you gave me 1 star, right? But you're right, taking absolute accountability, at the end of the day, you're the business that sold the product, right? Whether it's your fault or not from a quality control standpoint. But now you can now go to your vendors and say, hey guys, like, look, like, this is what our customers are saying, right? We can't continue having you on our shelves if, this keeps on happening, so on and so forth, right? So,
Yeah,
anyways,
exactly.
yeah.
One last interesting thing about Google
Yeah, yeah.
reviews, which we just recently heard, like one of our customers was like, "Oh yeah, we like seeing." One of our customers literally said, "We like seeing like not a perfect rating and not all perfect reviews because we know then it's a real place that's getting real reviews." And I never thought about that, even in all the years where Google reviews has mattered to me from a work perspective, right? It's like, oh yeah, I guess seeing that 1 star makes you think that it is real. And then people interact and say, I don't even agree with that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like they left that review, but I've been there. I know that that's not the case. So it's not
Yeah.
going to deter me from coming. So even customers themselves are reading these things and forming opinions and counter opinions based on what they're reading. So it's just really interesting how that can work.
Yeah, actually, now that you bring that up, conversions actually drop off after 4.8. I think they peak at 4. The biggest gap is from like 4 to 4.3. And I might be butchering this, I can find the actual study, but the biggest change in conversion happens from 4 to 4.3. But the largest peak is at, I think, 4.8, between 4.6 and 4.8, and actually drops off after that. So
Interesting.
there is also another study. I forgot what it was, but the volume, I think, past 500 or something like that, I think it doesn't really matter. But between, you want to get to like the 300 or the 200 or something like that. I can find the actual, study, but yeah, 5 stars actually reduces the conversion. Obviously, it's better than having 3 stars, but you'd rather a 4.8 technically if we're, really being, pedantic about, our reviews and stuff like that. But
That's really interesting. I've never heard that. Thanks for sharing.
yeah, no worries. I can, I'll make a note and then find the reviews study for you. But so we're, you've been in the industry for a little while now, right? You started the dispensary very recently, but where do you see the future of the cannabis industry heading?
I don't know, to be honest. Hemp is, I think, throwing a curveball to the industry.
Mhm.
Even the big MSOs are starting to pivot into hemp-derived THC products to be able to
Mhm.
go national, to be able to do D2C. What does that mean for the regulated markets? I mean, the regulated markets are interesting where the regulations help, in my opinion, people like me who are not, you know, backed by any large corporation. Like as long as I can do the fundraising, which I mean that's a big question mark, right? Like thankfully, I've been able to meet the right kinds of people and enough people that I was able to do the fundraising. But let's be frank, right? Like fundraising is the biggest blocker to anyone entering the business. But the regulations in a lot of ways do limit competition and it requires like extreme levels of competency when it comes to government affairs, fundraising, in order to navigate everything legal, right? And open your business. And then once you open your business, right now there are no moats. For a long time there were moats, right? Where you were protected from others opening. And even in a lot of ways, to be honest, like yes, I have 4 dispensaries right near me. But when you look at the overall region, there's like 2 huge towns and cities that are not going to allow any dispensaries. So that's a moat, right? That protects against competition, even if in the immediate area there's a lot of competition. Um, but that's a double-edged sword, right? Because that also makes it difficult to grow. It makes it difficult
Mhm.
to expand. And for the companies that have both capital and the expertise and regulations, they can really make sure you never succeed.
Yeah.
Now, when you flip over to the hemp side, right? Hemp is like barriers to entry are way, way lower, which means competition is going to go up, but you're working on a national scale and you can certainly find pockets of customers, experiences, and culture where you can thrive as a brand and as a company. And I think
Right.
that that's going to really, really, really impact what the future of the state regulated cannabis markets are going to be. And I don't even think anyone knows what that's going to exactly how that's going to play out just yet. Because it's
Right.
moving away from hemp products traditionally were associated with CBD. I think they started moving into full spectrum. But now, really with a focus on hemp-derived THC, you're talking about products that in a lot of ways, other than smokable flower, can achieve the same effects as what you're buying in the state regulated market. And I can pay with my credit card, right? I can pay with PayPal. I can just operate like a normal customer, not have to worry about PIN, debit, cashless ATM, any of that stuff. I can have it delivered directly to my house in a package just waiting for me. I don't have to walk out with my ID, right? So it's like, I think that that's going to change a lot of things. And right now I'm just kind of sitting back and saying, where is this all going to go?
Right.
So I guess the answer really is I don't know where the industry is going, because the regulations, I mean, descheduling or rescheduling is on the horizon as well. So yeah, a year from now, we could be looking at completely different national, regional, state landscape when it comes to cannabis.
Right. I think that answer perfectly transitions into this next little segment. So I'll hop right into it. So we have a little segment where we ask the previous guest that I've interviewed, what question do they have for the next guest? And then you'll have the opportunity to ask the question to the next guest. So this one is from Jazz Samra from Sativa Bliss. And he says, if you had the ear of the government and can change, well, he says three, but if you want to pick one, is fine, and can change three different regulations that would drastically impact your business, what would they be?
Wow. I mean, the ear of the government at what level? I would say at the federal level, it's definitely just legalize cannabis.
Right.
Like stop this madness of fragmented state markets, allow the plant to grow where it grows best, allow for, the cost of production to go down, and then the ability to open a store. Like, yes, there should still be certain levels of municipal control of, like, do we want to allow a dispensary, for whatever reason. I think that's fine. But just, yeah, legalize cannabis, allow it to just become a normal functioning market from a regulatory perspective, and then it's off to the races. The competition, people will survive. Let's see how it goes there. So that would be number one. I think when I'm talking on the state regulated market side, if I'm speaking to state regulators, I mean, me personally, I would love if there was some standardization of wholesale pricing, and not be it so that an MSO can sell to their dispensary a lot cheaper wholesale than it sells to me. That's probably right, my biggest obstacle to success, if my cost of goods sold is just artificially being held higher simply because I'm not right in their network. It makes it difficult for me to succeed. So I think there's some states that have done this, at least created a model or framework around it. So it would be great to be able to have that happen in New Jersey. And I mean, lastly, this probably goes back to the federal side, but payments. I mean, can't we just have access to the normal banking and payment system, please? I mean, not being able to offer credit card payments, having to do this weird cashless ATM payments thing. It's too much. I think it puts too much of a burden on us to try to educate customers around, like, I have to educate my customers around ACH, right? It's like, that's like, I'd rather be educating them around products than spending time like, this is how you pay for my product. So those would be the three big areas where I would love to just have, if I can immediately change it, I would change those three right away.
Right. And what question would you have for the next guest that I interview?
So for the next guest, like, wherever you are, I would just love to know what's moving the needle for your customers from a product perspective. Like, what are the products that they love? Why do they love it? And just kind of understanding that. I mean, to me, that's always, again, at the core, right? We're selling something that people like, people love, right? Not even just like. I mean, people who love cannabis, they love knowing their strains, the terp profiles, talking about this is how it makes me feel. And again, even with all the regulations, I think that there's a lot of innovation happening in cultivation where a lot of new types of products are coming out. And I just love hearing from different markets. Oh, this is the strain, this is the brand, this is what's selling really, really well. So I would love to know that from whoever your next guest is.
All right, perfect. And lastly, where can people find you / the store if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, so don't worry about me. Look for the store. Instagram at get_Anja, getanja.com. And we are similar on Facebook profile, LinkedIn. Connect with the store. Take a look at what we're doing. Offer recommendations. Stop by if you're ever near Highland Park or in the area. Please support us. We're again independent company. Just a bunch of random friends that came together thinking that we can do this, and in a lot of ways have been able to do it. So any and all support is appreciated.
Perfect. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you for listening to the Dispensary Marketing Podcast. This is one that you might have to re-listen to a couple times because the tactics that we went to might have been a little bit deep, but like super, super important. These numbers and metrics and KPIs that we always talk about, are things that are the back end engine for your business. And if you're not paying attention to these and you think that just opening up a store and people will come and so on and so forth, and you're not looking at how your customers churn, how you're getting new customers, the cost to acquire a customer, these are all like basic foundational things that you need to pay attention to. But that's it for now. Thanks for listening to the Dispensary Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Kwan, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dispensary Marketing Podcast. My name's Brandon Kwan, and I'm the founder of Cannabud Marketing, the #1 marketing agency of choice for dispensaries, both in the United States and in Canada. If you ever want to get in touch with me about any marketing strategies, tips, and tricks, I can definitely help you. Just go visit our website at cannabudmarketing.com. That's CANNABUD marketing.com, or just check the links in the description below. Until next time, talk to you later. Bye.